Yeah, let's get a clap. At that time, 2010, 2011, 2012, most people were using the Doepfer VCOs, and then there was also the Plan B Model 15, and I had both, and I really liked both. And then there was also the digital VCO, the Harvestman Hertz Donut, which was also awesome. I had that as well. And as time progressed, it seemed like maybe there was room for some more VCOs. But initially, it didn't really seem like there was room. Honestly, it seemed like you had the all the bases were covered. Oh, there was also the Livewire AFG. I can't leave that one out, which I had as well. The Hertz Donut was the first, I guess, complex oscillator in Eurorack. It was a dual, and it had a modulation bus between the two VCOs. At that time, the thing you need to know about the development of the DPO is that I had never heard of Buchla 259 when I developed the DPO. And the really good thing about developing a dual complex oscillator circa 2010 was that most people had not heard of Buchla 259. This predates all of the clones that are now widely available. And I'm not talking about Eurorack clones, but I'm talking actual Buchla 259 clones, as well as, obviously the Tip Top 259. And yeah, I mean, these things were not available. The only way you could hear a 259 is if you were one of a select bunch of people that either owned a Buchla 200 series system or were friends with someone who owned a Buchla 200 series system. And I'll go so far as to say this: I'm not sure I'd even heard a Buchla 259 on an album, except potentially for Barry Schrader's Lost Atlantis, which was recommended to me by Peter Grenader from Plan B. And on that album, I heard what I thought was a Buchla 259. So the design of the DPO is really more like as opposed to being a clone of a Buchla 259, it was more of a daydream of a Buchla 259. It was born out of daydreaming about what a Buchla 259 might sound like. Spent many, many hours looking at a large photo collection of the circuit boards and the faceplates that Paul Schreiber had up on his Synth DIY page of some sort. I can't remember what the address was, but he had a whole folder that was just loaded with images of early Buchla modules inside and out. And then there were some schematics floating around that a fellow Magnus Danielson had posted to the Synth DIY email group. And so I spent a lot of time looking at these photos, especially the ones that Paul had uploaded, and just sort of dreaming of what this oscillator, this dual complex oscillator, would sound like. So the DPO is probably, of all the Euro rack modular dual complex oscillators in the 259 vein, I would guess the DPO is probably the least accurate in reproducing the actual sound of a Buchla 259, because the designer had never heard a Buchla 259 until after the designer had finished the design. Shortly after the Make Noise DPO was launched, I became friends with Alessandro Cortini, and he, of course, allowed me to hear an actual Buchla 259. And I was a little astonished when I played with this vintage 259 at how tame it sounded to me. It wasn't quite as raw and aggressive as I had anticipated. And I think that if you were to compare a DPO to a 259, you would probably hear what I mean. The DPO is a lot, I've heard it described as being woolly. I always associate that with a woolly mammoth, and woolly mammoths are beast. And so I would say the DPO is definitely the beast of the pair. If you had a 259 and a DPO next to each other, it's definitely more of a beast. I have a couple here on the table, some prototype iterations, and this one might be of interest to folks just because it will look quite different from the original. This is one of the prototypes that was shown at the NAMM show alongside of a Echophone the same year. And as you can see, the button only has two options, sync and lock. There's no LFO option, and the graphics are a little more almost Art Deco influenced, with this multiple kind of useless lines kind of wrapping around each other. But aside from those things, most of it is here. There's not a lot of differences aside from that missing LFO range. And I can't remember how or why or who suggested to have that. And then here's one that's opened up. This is an old prototype. There's no solder mask on it because at that point I was doing I would do these really quick turn boards. Designs back then were a lot simpler. They were mostly 2 layers and they used larger components, so I would just build these myself. We didn't send them off to be built. But one thing that's kind of interesting is the first iteration of the DPO had more Vactrols in it. So there's 4 on the top, 1 for the follow circuit, 2 for the FM mod bus, and 1 for the Tambro mod bus. And then on the bottom board, there's 2 more, 1 to drive the wave folder and 1 to drive the shape circuit. And actually, that 1 in front of the wave folder is probably one of the largest differences between the Buchla 259 and the Make Noise DPO. The Buchla used a FET-based gain stage to drive the folder, and I used a low-pass gate essentially. And then also this mod bus is quite different. That's a part of where some of the more aggressive sound comes from, is that the mod bus goes both directions. So, and it can also do circular modulation. So A can modulate B, B can modulate A, and then also A can modulate B while B's modulating A.
Hey, you see DPO lately?
Nah, man, what's up with DPO?
DPO's shredding. Oh, yeah. Last last time I saw DPO, they were doing these Andrex. I mean, they were folded over like 3, 4, maybe 5 times. Sick! So sick.
Yabble dabble!
And then the mod bus is also quite different. So with the mod bus, and again, this is an early prototype. In the final version, these Vactrals on the bottom board are different. They're not this. In this version, they're both the same type, but in the final version, they're different types. And the reason that they're different types is that I wanted each of the timbral modifiers, the shape, the angle, and the fold, I wanted each of them to respond differently at different rates. So they each have different slew rates. So angle is the fastest. It's as fast as an op amp could go, which is very fast, and you wouldn't notice really any slew. The fold is sort of like a medium rate, and it uses a Vactral circuit. And then the shape circuit is the slowest of all of them, and it uses this a different type of Vactral, and it still does to this day. But the idea is that that Vactral is also tuned to be a lot sleepier. It doesn't wake up as fast as the Vactral in the fold circuit. And the reason that I did that is because you have this this modulator carrier arrangement with the A and B oscillators, or the primary and carrier, or the modulator and carrier. I'm sorry, it would be primary and modulator, or the modulator and carrier. And this oscillator on the left could act as an LFO, which is routed to shape, angle, and fold via the mod bus. And if all of these circuits respond at a similar rate, then it just ends up sounding like it's too much. It's like everything's just kind of going in one direction at one speed, and so everything's changing in the same way at the same time. But if each of these circuits responds differently at different rates with different slew rates, then one LFO can end up sounding like 3 different LFOs, because the 3 different circuits are all responding so differently to that same LFO. And that is something that I think makes the DPO, I think it's a little bit of the magic in the DPO, is the fact that this one LFO provided by a modulation oscillator can impact these 3 timbre circuits quite differently. Because I spent a lot of time at Moog Music working on Voyagers and other Moog instruments, I like the sound of oscillator sync, and so I added that. So you have a sync option on the DPO, and that provides a way to vary the timbre on the left oscillator, or the A oscillator, or the modulator oscillator, however you want to call it. And so, in essence, either of the oscillators can be a primary oscillator, as people would call it, because the left oscillator can have the timbre modulated through oscillator sync, and the right can have timbre modulated via the shape, angle, and fold. At times, we've said that the DPO, the acronym stands for Dual Primary Oscillator. A few months into the release of the DPO, we had sent one to Robert A.A. Lowe, and I think he believed that the name was Dual Prismatic, oscillator because he felt like the shape, angle, and fold parameters had the effect of almost like a light through a prism. I like the Dual Prismatic oscillator name. I think that's a pretty good one. There are some things that are on the DPO, and as you can see here, I guess another difference between this early prototype and the later one is this X lock input, and that is just a soft sync for the second oscillator. That's something that I think is on the 259. It's been a minute since I've used one of those, but I know that it's also probably one of the least used inputs on the DPO. Maybe there's someone out there and that's their magic, their secret sauce, but I seriously doubt it. Other things that are of interest here, let's see. Oh, a strike. So there's a strike input on the folder, and I put that there because I put a strike on the Optimix and people liked it a lot. And since I was driving the wave folder with a low pass gate, I thought, well, I'll put a strike input here, and you can use it as an accent for an even more aggressive sound from time to time. Truth be told, the strike input on the fold is quite aggressive. I do often wonder how often people have used it in music. It seems like the kind of thing that you wouldn't want to use too often. But also, just try and keep in mind that when the DPO came out, like I said, there weren't numerous complex oscillators available. It's interesting. You look at this circuit board and it's so spacious. There's just not much going on in there. There's lots of room. All the traces are really spread out. The parts are all the larger 0805 resistors. Today we would use 0603 or even 0402. Like I said, it's a two-sided board, where today we would use 4 or 6 layer boards. So yeah, it's really kind of an interesting thing to look at, because it also kind of shows where Eurorack has developed. Everything has gotten more condensed. Functional density has increased a great deal. I mean, when this module came out, when the DPO came out, it was considered functionally dense. But I think today it would be considered a somewhat spacious, old school module, because there's room to fit your fingers around the knobs. And it really just does two things. It oscillates and it oscillates. Absolutely. Actually, the patch that I built for the last music release that I did, Imagine a Dolphin, that was entirely a shared system patch, and the DPO plays a big role in that patch. The last few shows I've played have been that same patch on the shared system. So it's an entirely shared system based patch. It uses recordings that I did of water. They're like high definition recordings that I did of water. And then the DPO is sort of driven by those recordings. So it is also sounding quite a bit like water. I'm not using the final output, so there's no wave folded tones. It's all sine waves and FM. So there's quite a bit of FM. It's used both directions. The only concept that has remained of interest is the bit that I talked about with the shape, angle, and fold, and the way that they respond differently to the same control signal, like dramatically different. And that is sort of, I guess, in a way, an early version of multi-mod. It's the idea that you have one LFO, but you can send it to multiple places, and it's a little different at each destination. So multi-mod makes several copies of an LFO, slows them down or speeds them up. Has them in different phases. The net effect is that one LFO ends up pushing each parameter where it's patched. It's pushing it to a different spot. So while fold is at its maximum, shape is only at its very beginning, around say 10% of its maximum. That concept of this sort of multi-modulation definitely started with the DPO, and it is being carried on in a big way today, probably more today than ever.